Wrestling Revolution fans, it's Jarrett still here on the Wrestling Revolution. Still seeing these mysterious 3/18/11 videos. And we aren't really sure what's going on yet, but we do know what's going on right now. And it is the list. The return of the list. Top 10 worst moments in professional wrestling history. And this one is a very arguable, very debatable, very controversial list. You can see there's actually been changes made by the Wrestling Revolution before this list even hit the air. But we're going to start with number 10. And, well, you really can't start anywhere else. But Vince McMahon's $1 Million Mania. Vince McMahon would begin to give out money to WWE fans, and then, at the conclusion, the stage would collapse and Vince McMahon would be crushed underneath. And this was coming off of the Vince McMahon limo explosion, and it seemed like they were trying to find ways to kill off the character, literally. It was a pretty big waste of time, in my opinion. $1 Million Mania, not really a great idea. We talked about it on the Wrestling Revolution when it happened. Wasn't my cup of tea. Neither was number 9. When the Cruiserweight division on Smackdown began to thin down, they looked for something different. And they got it in the form of Hornswoggle, the little leprechaun. Finley's little 4-foot, 80-pound leprechaun. At the Great American Bash, Hornswoggle would become the Cruiserweight Champion of the world, thus literally killing an era in professional wrestling. The era of the Cruiserweights was gone, and Hornswoggle was the champion. What many people believe is the death of a championship and the death of an era. Hornswoggle becomes the Cruiserweight Champion. And speaking of the death of a championship, what about this one? In 2006, ECW was reborn in the WWE. And by 2007, the ECW World Championship was not coveted by an ECW original, but an upstart, Bobby Lashley. He was the ECW World Champion. However, at Backlash, Bobby Lashley would get his revenge, more or less payback, from Vince McMahon after shaving the owner's head. When in a 3-on-1 handicap match, Vince McMahon would become the ECW World Heavyweight Champion. Vince McMahon would hold the ECW World title for months, thus really sticking it to the ECW original of the roster, such as Tommy Dreamer, The Sandman, Balls Mahoney, Rob Van Dam, and Sabu. This was the time when the new breed was taking over ECW, making it an interesting faction war, but at the same time, you had Vince McMahon as the ECW World Champion. Another shot at an era and a division which is no longer around. From there, ladies and gentlemen, we go to possibly, the weirdest thing I've ever seen. When Mae Young was brought on the WWE TV again, she was a very loose elder woman, that's the best way to put it, and would have a relation with sexual chocolate Mark Henry. Mae Young would become pregnant, ladies and gentlemen, and when it was time for birth, no one expected what we saw. We saw the birth of a hand. And before I turn into Gerald Briscoe and Upchuck, let's just move on to the next one. Let's just move on. Let's just what are we on here? We're on number 6, I think. I'm gonna call it number 6, because I'm really disturbed right now. TNA Victory Road 2011. Need I say more? The 92nd main event for the World Heavyweight title, the Jeff Hardy controversy. Your locker room's in turmoil. You're not doing anything to help yourself, except make the top 10 worst moment list in professional wrestling history, according to the Wrestling Revolution. TNA needs to make a change, or the next Wrestling Revolution, we could be talking about the end of Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. From there, we go to Backlash, 2006. A year before Vince McMahon became the ECW World Champion, he had a different goal. Not to take out Bobby Lashley, but to end Shawn Michaels. After a vicious match at WrestleMania and a brutal war between Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon against Shawn Michaels, the McMahons looked to end Shawn Michaels forever. In a very unique tag team match at Backlash. It was Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon in one corner. The other corner was Shawn Michaels and God. Shawn Michaels would team with God to face Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon. And with interference from the Spirit Squad, Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon would defeat Shawn Michaels and God. Vince McMahon made a mockery of it the entire build-up to this pay-per-view. And at the end of the night, you heard it said best by Jerry Lawler. It was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit squad. One of the most uncomfortable, very, very dangerous, if you will, storylines. If I was Vince McMahon, I'd be afraid a bolt of lightning would come down and shoot me through the arena and leave me dead in the ring. That's just me. Very, very interesting, over the top. It makes the list. It makes the list. And ladies and gentlemen, from there, we're going to WCW. Because we're going to enter our top 5 now. We're going to enter the top 5 with what has been known to the wrestling world as the finger poke of doom. We're already in the top 5, but the finger poke of doom is next. Goldberg was defeated as the WCW World Heavyweight Champion at Starrcade 98. Kevin Nash put the streak to an end, 173-1, after interference from Scott Hall. The next night, the return of Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Hogan, we thought, was going to run for president, but Kevin Nash laid down the offer. If Hogan returned from retirement, he would give Hulk Hogan a shot at the WCW World title. With Scott Steiner in his corner, Hollywood Hulk Hogan returned to the wrestling world to challenge Kevin Nash. Scott Hall in his corner, the reuniting of the Outsiders. And what would be a very impactful main event. On the first Nitro of 1999, one finger took down Kevin Nash as Kevin Nash laid down and handed Hollywood Hogan the WCW World title. From there, ladies and gentlemen, the NWO Wolfpack was formed, and the Wolfpack began to take over Nitro with Hollywood Hogan as his frontman. However, that was one of the worst moves in WCW history. An outraged locker room, realizing the power lied wherever Hulk Hogan was. Hulk Hogan was given the WCW World title and never beat Goldberg. That same night, Mick Foley won the world title, and Raw beat Nitro in the ratings. And the power struggle would flip to the WWE, and they would never look back. Some call it the biggest mistake in WCW history. I call it one of the most disturbing and worst moments of professional wrestling history. Speaking of disturbing and speaking of bad, let's go to number 3. In 2003, the lovely Dawn Marie made her presence felt in the WWE when she married Tori Wilson's father, Al Wilson. And the two would have a unique, if you will, wedding. They were both in their underwear. Dawn Marie good, Al Wilson not so much. But nonetheless, they were married in their underwear. Then on the honeymoon, you would see, after Lord knows what, Dawn Marie goes check on Al Wilson, the elder, very elder Al Wilson, and Al had a heart attack, and Al passed away with Dawn Marie on top of him, which which I thought was bad enough, but they would go farther. And this is after Billy and Chuck. Just saying. They didn't even make the list. But, the funeral home. For Al Wilson's funeral, Tori Wilson comes into remorse and look back at her father, and Dawn Marie attacks in a funeral home. In a funeral home with a light to the back of the head. And a match was set. The first ever stepmother versus stepdaughter match at the Royal Rumble. The concept was there, but really weird stuff. Really weird stuff with Al Wilson. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Because number 2, we're going to WCW. David Arquette was filming the movie Ready to Rumble featuring the WCW stars. This was supposed to be the turnaround moment for WCW. Before The Rock and Stone Cold and Triple H and John Cena ventured out into Hollywood, the WCW stars took it to Ready to Rumble and the 3-cage Terror of Doom match from Ready to Rumble. But David Arquette and WCW took it one step farther. When World Heavyweight Champion Jeff Jarrett got an altercation with David Arquette, a match was set for Thunder. World Heavyweight Champion Jeff Jarrett teamed with WCW President Eric Bischoff to take on #1 contender Diamond Dallas Page and Dallas Page's new friend, David Arquette. And with the world title on the line under tag team rules, anyone could pin any opponent to win the world title. When Arquette returned to the ring and speared Eric Bischoff and got the 1-2-3, David Arquette became the WCW World Champion. Now look at the line of history in WCW. Vader, Sting, Ric Flair, Ron Simmons, Harley Race, Hulk Hogan, DDP, Goldberg, Ricky Steamboat, just to name a few. And now add David Arquette to the list. David Arquette was the WCW World Champion. He would hold it until Slamboree, when the 3-cage Terror of Doom matchup would debut. And David Arquette would show his true colors, turning on Diamond Dallas Page and awarding Jeff Jarrett the world title again. David Arquette winning the world title. If celebrities are used right, I say use them. But as the world champion, they make the list. And then number 1. The most shocking, controversial, disturbing, worst moment in wrestling history. Katie Vick. In 2002, Triple H was the World Heavyweight Champion of Raw. He was set to go at No Mercy in a title unification bout against the Intercontinental Champion Kane. And just when we thought Kane was on a hot streak, he was the Intercontinental Champion. He retained the World Tag Team title with the Hurricane. And Triple H came out and spilled 2 words. Katie Vick. And after the spilling of Katie Vick, Kane would never be the same again. It was found out later that Kane was drunk driving and actually got in a car wreck and killed Katie Vick. And you thought that was the worst of the story. Not only was Kane a murderer, Kane flew out there, according to Triple H. We would see home movies of Kane going into a funeral home at Katie Vick's funeral. Obviously, Triple H in a Kane mask would go into the coffin and find a mannequin, a Katie Vick mannequin, which Kane had sex with Katie Vick's dead body. This was the build-up for the title unification bout at No Mercy. Drunk driving, sex with a dead body, and the World Heavyweight Champion on top of a mannequin. Need I say more? That, my friends, is the worst moment in professional wrestling history. You don't like the list? You think something else should have been on it? You think something should have been somewhere else? Right there's the link. WrestlingRevolution1.proboards.com. Comment on the list. Give me your feedback. Let me know what you think. We can always change the list. We can always redo it. But folks, when we come back right here on the Wrestling Revolution, we have to talk about fantasy matchup. because we have a great one this week on the Wrestling Revolution.